Okay, so yes, here, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm here to talk about the National Digital Twin Programme, which is run by the Department for Business and Trade on behalf of His Majesty's Government. So just to really give a bit of a high-level overview as to where the programme has come from. It was really born out of the National Infrastructure Commission's report Data for the Public Good, that stated something that probably all of us know, that ability to be able to bring information together from across sectors and domains would be hugely helpful in being able to support better decision making, particularly when you are able to better visualize, analyze and engage with that information and understand different possibilities as to how you can achieve different outcomes. So the National Digital Twin Programme is not there to create the National Digital Twin per se, rather it is there to create the underpinning rules of the road, or the handrails, if you like, that will enable digital twins individually and when connected to have appropriate levels of safety and security, to provide appropriate levels of trust, to be ethical and sustainable, and also that digital twins can be adaptable over time and also can be interoperable. It's also therefore about developing those things and by doing so, creating that functioning market and supporting that functioning market in digital twins. And obviously, because it sits within the Department for Business and Trade, it's also about supporting that market growth in the UK and ultimately more broadly. The programme can be divided really into four big chunks. The first being the operating framework. So this is really around the sorts of policies and processes, the wrappers that need to sit around the technology and the data. So these are things such as security framework, safety framework, legal frameworks, ultimately as well, how we get something like a national digital twin to be self-sustaining. So what are the commercial models that need to sit around this as well? So there's a whole piece of work looking at that policy and process piece. All of that policy and process sits around the data and technology. And so this is really both around how do you better be able to understand the information that is required to address particular use cases. How do you understand the sources of that information, the quality of the information, and then be able to process that information, make it interoperable, and to be able to share that across distributed systems. So being able to federate the information that you require for particular use cases. It's not only obviously about the data sharing, it's about the tools that you then can put on top of that data, that information, in order to be able to start visualizing it, engaging with it, analyzing it, modeling it, etc. And that doesn't necessarily always have to be digital twin. I think there is a tendency at the moment, digital twin being somewhat on the hype curve, that the answer is digital twin, what is the question? But rather trying to understand from the other way around, what is the question and what is the right technology, what are the right tools to be using to engage with that information, and understanding that different users, different stakeholders will require different interfaces with that information. It's no good presenting a highly technical interface with that information to somebody that is trying to make a strategic decision, unless of course they are also a technical person themselves. We need to be thinking much more about the right interfaces for the different users to enable them to do what they need to be doing with that information. The third chunk is looking at the softer elements, so the skills, culture, the change that needs to happen. It's no good us doing all of this work if it's not adopted because people don't trust the technology, the processes, they feel things are being done in a way that isn't ethical, etc. So how do we address people's concerns? How do we look at the mindset? What skills are people going to need? And that's both people that are already in the profession, but also the next generation that will be taking on these types of technologies and really driving them forward. And then lastly, the demonstrator program. So this is about taking the elements that sit in the other three key streams and bashing them up against real life problems. And this enables us to develop and test things very quickly, to be able to fail fast. So if things are not working as we thought they would, obviously we can quickly go back, amend, push it back out, test it again, and keep doing that until we get to a point where we feel that we have developed things that are both use case and sector agnostic, and importantly are also highly scalable and adoptable. So a large part of the demonstrator program is taking place on the Isle of Wight. There are other demonstration programs that are taking place as well. But that enables us to do things at on the sort of microcosm of the broader UK. But it's also important that we are able to take those artifacts and test them elsewhere and look at how they scale. Because if things are not scalable and adoptable, the National Digital Twin won't happen. So I really just wanted to pick up on a few key elements of the programme to talk about in more detail today. So firstly, wanted to talk about a key piece of the data and technology work. So this is about the development of the integration architecture and also the ontology that sits within that integration architecture that we're currently using. So this, as I say, very much about how do we bring information together from across different systems within an organization, but also importantly, bring together information from across organizations, from across different sectors. So making that information interoperable. And how can we do that in a way that is as low barrier to adoption as possible? And this is really important from a government perspective because it's clearly important that as many people are able to participate in this as possible. So if we are relying on organizations having a high level of technical capability and resource to participate, we are excluding a huge amount of particularly the public sector. So local authorities don't have the same level of capability and resource in this space that other organisations have, certainly within central government. So it's really important that we think about those stakeholders as well and ensure that they are able to participate in this. So the integration architecture, as I say, is about how do we bring that information together and do that in a way that is really trusted, secure and resilient. This is a piece of work that is being developed to be open source. We will have the first release of this integration architecture in April 2024. It will continue to be developed after that, and further open source releases will be pushed out after that time. The principle of really what it does is about using adapters to bring information together from a number of different types of data sources. And we're trying to create as many adapters as possible to common types of data sources. So that could be databases, systems that exist within organizations, but we're also looking at how do you bring information together from other different sources as well. So both static and dynamic data. So bringing information from sensors, from robotics, etc. as well. So once that information has been through the adapter, you bring it into the integration architecture where the information can be cleansed. Now that a lot of the organizations we're seeing here want to do that cleansing outside the integration architecture, and that is also perfectly possible. But it will also be possible to cleanse that data within the architecture. The data is then resolved. So you look at and understand, have I seen this data before? Is this new data? Is this additional information to that I had before? And then it is mapped onto an ontology. And the ontology that we're using is the Information Exchange Standard. That is an ontology, a 4D ontology. So it deals very well with space and time, that has been developed primarily initially by the security, defence and national policing community. But we have now taken on some of the development of that ontology and are extending it to look at a far broader range of information that we would need to be able to bring in to support something like the National Digital Twin. Once that information is being mapped onto that ontology, it's projected into highly secure databases. And in those databases, we have attribute-based access control. So that is being done in line with the GCHQ NSA standard around attribute-based access control. And then that information, once it's been secured, is projected through APIs, and then other organizations can come and develop on top of those APIs, knowing that the information has been secured and protected, and therefore they are not having to worry about that in developing products to sit on top. Well, not worry it to the same extent, certainly. The whole system is also being built to be zero trust. And ultimately, as I said, will be a distributed system. So something that we are also starting to look at, and this is early days on this, is how can you then start federating information across instances of the integration architecture. So we're not creating one single giant digital twin to rule them all, but rather looking at how you bring the information together that you need for your particular use case. And as I say, so we've started doing this in relation to the demonstrator work that we're doing on the Isle of Wight. So really testing, can we make this work, and can we do it? So we are regularly bringing streaming data in. So I will talk a little bit more about this particular particular demonstrator later, but it's really about testing, bringing in different data sources. And this is all open data at this stage on this particular use case. So bringing in data from various APIs, bringing it into the integration architecture, taking it through that process that I've described, and then enabling another organization to come in and build a highly powerful visualization tool. I would say it's not a digital twin, but a highly powerful visualization tool that meets the user requirements of a number of different stakeholders on the Isle of Wight. And as I said, I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail shortly. I also mentioned the fact that we're using the Information Exchange Standard Ontology. So this is currently at version 4.2. This is also openly available. And we are, as I say, starting to really expand that ontology and extending it to be able to bring in a far wider range of data. And it's also starting to be picked up and used more broadly, particularly across government. So I said I would talk a little bit as well about the demonstrators. So the first one that I wanted to talk about, which is probably the most advanced one, is around housing retrofit. So this is to do with retrofit of domestic properties in order to improve energy efficiency and support the desire to achieve net zero. So it's really important that with all of the demonstrators, we are producing artifacts that others can start using. They are also supporting and delivering value to and benefit to stakeholders on the island and ultimately more broadly, and also testing for the National Digital Twin Programme hypotheses about what digital twins will enable us to do. But it's really important that we go through that whole process. So this isn't about just getting caught up in the glamour of digital twins, but rather starting right back at the beginning of the process. So understanding the problem statement, what is the issue that we are trying to solve, and then understanding things such as the needs and requirements, the key information that needs to be pulled in to address that user requirement. Really, and doing that by really understanding the stakeholders, the roles that they have, and the requirements that they have to be able to engage with that information. So this is about developing really a series of playbooks as to how do you go about this? How do you understand the carbon footprint as well of what you're doing? The more data you're collecting and processing, the higher the carbon footprint associated with that. So what's the cost of that, and what is the value that you're driving out of the work that you're doing? As I say, those playbooks will be tested across multiple different use cases, across multiple types of sectors, so that they become as sector agnostic as possible. It's then, as I say, about once those data sources have been identified, about how do we go and get those data sources, pulling them in through, at the moment, through APIs, as I said, the ones that we're using at the moment, and we are looking to expand this to data sources that are not open as well, but at the moment using open data sources, taking that through a cleansing process to understand and to look at the quality of that data that we have, and as much as possible we are using open source tools to be able to do this, so that they are things that then others can start picking up and using as well. Once that data has been cleansed, and at the moment we are cleansing that data outside the integration architecture, so then taking that information through the integration architecture. And then, as I said earlier, about bringing a visualization tool on top of that. And we've done one that was using a very highly powerful gaming engine, but we're also looking at some other tools that we're building from the ground up using open source systems. The second demonstrator really I wanted just to quickly highlight was the one that we're doing around asset resilience. We were really lucky to be able to actually go and observe an exercise on the Isle of Wight. They do testing their resilience and gaming effectively a real scenario, bringing people together and looking at how do they share information and how do they plan for these types of incidents. Of course, actually, at the moment, the Isle of Wight is going through a very similar scenario to the one that they were actually gaming at this exercise. They're currently under an amber alert for flooding. But this was really helpful in us being able to start understanding the types of information that people need to be able to bring together to be able to better plan for and respond to incidents, but also really for us to see how long it takes and the types of challenges that people have when they're trying to bring this information together across a number of different sources, and also trying to understand the quality of that information. So really useful exercise for us to be able to observe in real time what happens in these types of exercises, and therefore where the technology can really drive significant benefit and where do we need to focus. And interestingly, the previous image that you saw was how they're currently doing a lot of that planning, so using really very little digital technology at all. And then looking at some very early work that we did and comparing and contrasting, so how fast, if they'd had this sort of technology, could they have brought that information together and much more quickly understood the sort of scenario that they were facing in that exercise. So this is a tool that was developed that is sitting on top of the integration architecture as well. It's called Paralog. It's also open source, or will be open source. And this is about really understanding the interconnectivity of different assets on the island and looking at the interconnectivity, the vulnerability and the dependency of those assets, and being able to start layering other data on top to understand things like downstream impacts of, for example, an asset being flooded or an asset failing in some other way, and looking as well at then how do you start managing that situation. So really, I appreciate very quick canter through the program. Obviously, it's a large program, and only 20 minutes to talk on it is obviously not a huge amount of time, but hopefully it just gives you a view of the type of work that is happening within it. If you are interested in finding out more, please obviously do get in touch. We do contract a lot of work out through a mechanism, the Accelerated Capability Environment, that is run by the Home Office. And that really enables lots of different organisations to get involved in what we're doing, to be able to run lots of different types of pieces of work. So very keen for people to engage with the programme and what we're doing. And obviously, as I say, very willing to provide more information to people if that is of interest. Thank you very much.